welcome everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. Good morning. Welcome to the final seminar for the Agrarian Change Seminar series. This term, my name is Shreya Sinha. I'm one of the editors of the journal, and I'm a lecturer at Queen Mary, University of London. I'm, of course, very grateful to Manish for joining us today, but also just before we start, I would like to thank Amod Shah from ISS The Hague and Carlos Muanga from SOAS for supporting the organization of today's event. Carlos couldn't join due to illness. Amod is here but cannot participate for other reasons. Just thanks to them. So as always, before we start, I just want to also, of course, flag that that this event is recorded and we usually put it up on YouTube. So if you don't want your audio or video to be recorded, please keep your camera off and you can still use the chat for comments and questions. Okay, so over to today's seminar then. We have today Dr. Manish Maskara, who has completed his PhD in development studies from SOAS, University of London. He also teaches there. His doctoral thesis has examined the class formation in the context of labor migration in India's building construction industry. And his interests are around exploitation and labor migration, lived experience of exploitation, and the associated politics of class relations. And he's also published journal articles and book chapters on kind of this area. And of course, this is what we will be hearing more about today. So welcome, Manish. So you have, as you know, you have about 45 minutes to speak. And after that, we'll have questions and a discussion. So over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Shreya. Thank you so much. I'll just share my screen now. Yeah. Yeah, and hopefully it's
it's
visible.
good. Yes, thanks.
Thanks, Shreya, for sending the invite for the seminar. I mean, it feels quite, and I can't believe it that I'm here presenting my research so soon after having just finished very recently. Okay, so I'll straight away jump into this presentation. So I've titled today's presentation as Everyday Politics of Class Relations, Subcontracting and Classes of Labor in India's Building Construction. To start off with, I would like to give a bit of a context, is labor migration has historically remained a central component of organizing exploitation. It has enabled the organization of exploitation through a system of migrant labor. Such a system separates the daily maintenance and renewal of labor power by passing on the cost of social reproduction to migrant sending regions or so-called sending states or the families back at home. The state and capital co-constitute and regulate the system of migrant labor, for instance, through passports and legal regulations. We are very much aware that now Indian workers are being sent to Israel and Taiwan because of what has happened globally. That is more like a recent example, but we have seen historically South African migrant workers in the mines or South Asian migrant workers in the Gulf as well. When it comes to internal labor migration, the classic case for looking at internal labor migration apart from China is, of course, India. And in the context of internal labor migration, circulation of labor between villages and cities controls and cheapens labor power. Social relations of caste, gender, ethnicity, and region, and migrants seen as second-class citizens within their country shape the internal alienness of migrant labor. Bihar, as a state in East India, has historically remained a labor catchment area owing to the uneven and combined capitalist development process. As a result, classes of labor from Bihar are compelled to seek work in building construction in the country. Bihari laborers have historically been valorized and preferred for their ability to work in mills, plantations, brick industry, and much more recently, building construction. These are mostly male migrant workers who work in building construction within the country. So as much as we know that, yes, exploitation is enabled through labor migration, for my thesis, I come from a view that class is at the core of the dynamics and reproduction of capitalism. One cannot ignore the relevance of class relations in that sense. However, the significance of class has been questioned given the absence of class-based political action in case of migrant laborers in India. This has happened as a result of delinking labor migration from production relations or otherwise going beyond production relations. Also, production relations has been treated something as the economic realm, and all other relations such as caste, race, ethnicity as are seen as having little or nothing to do with how exploitation is organized. Moreover, there has been relatively little attention to the contradictory ways in which class relations are organized. In that sense, there is a need to not abandon, but to rethink. So how should we make sense of class in a context like this? A starting point to revisit class analysis and examine for the purpose of examining class relations is to use dialectical ways of examining class. One needs to examine the contradictory ways in which class relations are reproduced. Michael Barway's work says class relations are both about the domination by capital, but also resistance by labor. Focusing on production relations, one needs to move away from this idea of treating production relations as the economic realm and all other social relations as outside the economic realm. E.P. Thompson's Making of the English Working Class indicates that social and cultural realms do not trail after the economic, that is, production relations. Instead, they are immersed in the economic realm. Exploitation is also organized by moral and cultural realms as well. And here I quote Stuart Hall's work of 1986, where he argues that the culturally specific forms of labor power are central to organizing exploitation. And in that case, I see labor migration as a central area. Production relations produce political effects, as Michael Barway argues, which in turn shapes the lived experience of exploitation. But these lived experience of exploitation need to be seen in what McNally calls concrete universals. And as McNally indicates, that concrete universals are constitution of universals, in this case, of the lived experience of exploitation, in and through the differences of culturally specific forms of labor power from specific regions within India who work as construction labor. So my thesis follows this broad framework to examine class. My question is, so how does subcontracting in organizing the production process in India's building construction shape class relations? So my research takes the case of large-scale building construction sites. And by large scale, I mean I have come across sites in India where there are as much as 500 laborers, but they could be up to around 3,000 to 4,000 workers working at a single construction site. And to try and start moving towards the argument, my focus here is to make sense of what are the mechanisms of exploitation in building construction and how the lived experience of exploitation is shaped. And I take the case of Bihari migrant laborers in India's construction industry. So Barway's research on the politics of production indicates that the political apparatus of production, which is the specific political and ideological institutions, they reproduce relations of the labor process and regulate class struggles. In terms of method, I use Barway's extended case method, which is about extending out from the specific case of Bihari migrant laborers in India's building construction to make sense of class relations. In terms of field work, I was spending my time at construction sites and labor camps in the city of Hyderabad in India. I had to navigate the issues of accessing large-scale construction sites, which not just in India, but across the world, it is heavily gated and surveilled. So it's near to impossible to get access. Uh, However, myself being a student from Bihar, and I found that quite helpful in trying to make my way to access these sites by uh, yeah, I mean, making friends with workers at liquor shops, hanging around at construction sites, and they're wondering what is this guy actually up to, where he just turns up in the morning and does not go back till the evening. So being a Bihari student researcher, as much as it enabled me to get access to the large-scale construction sites, it also created issues of power. For instance, expectation of workers from me, and how they made sense of my everyday presence as a possible friend of the building construction company who is just trying to identify how the workers are actually working or not, or possibly a labor inspector at the site, or much more possibly a doctor because of my glasses, or a school teacher for the children. And these understandings of how they made sense of my position there at times concealed what happens at the sites, but it otherwise also helped me to enter into these conversations about class. Although my physical presence at the work sites was interrupted due to the COVID-19 lockdown, however, I managed to make use of some bit of WhatsApp to keep connected with research participants. Okay, so I just want to give you a glimpse of so what happens in construction industry. And if you see the figure here, it is more like how subcontracting is organized within building construction. You have at the top the property developers and its construction company, and all the three stages of production: excavation, finishing, and the other one is the services. And in all these three key stages of construction, are actually subcontracted to what is called labor contractors, who are actually coming from different parts of the country. Subcontracting is a method of organizing the production process in the global building construction industry, wherein different stages of construction work are contracted to multiple contractors. And in the Indian context, they're colloquially called thekedars. It disguises wage labor relations while enabling surplus extraction. And during my fieldwork, most of my conversations with workers and thekedars were about, they could identify that these sites are called thekedari sites. So what is thekedari all about? Thekedari is a joint enterprise of surplus accumulation. So not just building companies accumulate surplus, but these thekedars as well. So who are these thekedars? Uh, Thekedars are from Bihar, are mostly upper caste Hindu and Muslim, historically land owning people, or either they have been skilled craftsmen in building construction. Thekedars, however, thekedars have also been skilled craftsmen in building construction. However, they are not, in my view, to be considered as classes of labor, as they accumulate surplus in lieu of providing regular work to Bihari laborers mobilized by them. In accumulating surplus, thekedars could actually undertake multiple contracts at different construction sites. And not just in the same city, they would have workers working in Bombay, city of Nagpur, Delhi, etc., etc. So through this same thekedar having this network, he would be able to run different construction sites, and depending on their ability to mobilize number of workers in their gang. So how did my fieldwork look like? So as you see here, the first work site on the left, this is the image of, and I've changed the name of the builders. Probably I don't want to be caught by them later on. So the first site is called Rishabh Builders and Developers. And I was looking at the process of masonry, which is basically bricklaying and plastering, which goes on the walls. So for the task of masonry, it was actually subcontracted to multiple thekedars on a measured output of work basis. And I saw here, my interaction here was with a Muslim thekedar from Bihar, who indicated that he has historically been from a zamindar, that is a land owning family, and he has been working with roughly around 25 to 30 Bihari workers at this site. My second site was slightly far off from the first one, which I call BSS. And at BSS, the work was about looking at shuttering. And I'll just explain in a moment what is that. And here I was engaging with a thekedar from Bihar, a Hindu thekedar, upper caste, who is also working, again, from a landowning family, working with roughly around 30 to 50 Bihari workers. In the initial period of my fieldwork, when I just started, I was doing random visits to these construction sites, and I was speaking to roughly around 25 to 30 different thekedars across 5 to 6 large construction sites in the city. And interestingly, I was surprised to find that most thekedars whom I interacted with, they actually knew each other in one way or the other. And they were also vocal about their caste background. Not surprisingly, I came across laborers from Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, tribal parts of Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, different states in India, mobilized by thekedars at different construction sites. However, my focus of the research was these two sites here. Masonry in building construction is about bricklaying and plastering using brick, cement, sand, and water to make walls. But shuttering work, it requires the setting up of wooden planks or steel plates that provide a mold for the concrete and support it until it is set. Shuttering work usually happens when the steel work has happened, but before masonry can take place. So shuttering actually precedes the work of masonry. And for the conceptualization of my framework, I see that the thekedari system is actually the political apparatus of surplus extraction in building construction. The system has historically evolved from the so-called Sardari system in the mills and plantations in early 19th century India, which was enabled by the role of the state. Such a system not only enabled mobilization of labor for the labor process, but it also shaped class conflicts, as argued by Raj Chandavarkar. In doing so, it enabled organizing and reproducing a system of migrant labor for surplus extraction. And I argue that the thekedari system needs to be seen as a political apparatus of production in the context of construction work. Such a system uses social relations of caste and moral economy ties with laborers to exercise control in enforcing surplus extraction. Thekedars develop their core and trusted labor network, and that becomes a means to exercise control over other Bihari laborers, legitimizing differences in wage rates based on skill, etc. Further, thekedars also hire labor accountant called Munshi and the supervisor who's called the foreman to ensure management of day-to-day labor rounds of workers, but also day-to-day, everyday construction work. And as a result, the system shapes the everyday experience of exploitation of Bihari workers, and in turn, it regulates class struggles. So my argument is that everyday politics of class relations are shaped by conditions of production and reproduction, which compose the architecture of surplus extraction, and also how exploitation is lived and experienced. The mechanisms of exploitation are actually in a direct dialectical relation with how workers live their exploitation on a day-to-day basis, as a result of which the struggle over social relations which shape the architecture of exploitation can remain visible or invisible, depending on how the experience of exploitation is politically produced under the thekedari system. Under specific conditions of production and reproduction, I argue that the thekedari system, while it organizes and reproduces the process of exploitation, it enables and silences class relations by shaping concrete universals of the lived experience of exploitation. And in this sense, I identify Bihariness of workers as a concrete universal of the lived experience of exploitation, which is composed of differences in skill between workers, differences in their caste background, particular villages from where they come from. And in this sense, Bihari migrant laborers accept, negotiate, and to some extent may attempt to alter the architecture of exploitation. And my work also indicates that class-based political action is possible, but not plausible. So how is exploitation organized in large-scale building construction? Surplus extraction in large-scale construction is composed of the organization of work and also how relations that enable the organization of work are reproduced under the thekedari system. Effectively, the role of the thekedari system is to actually tie or interlock the production process with the daily reproduction of labor power. The first in the figure here on the left side, you see the component of mobilization of labor power is to reserve and retain labor power from of workers who can be mobilized from different villages of Bihar by upper caste thekedars who need to pay cash in advance to the workers to be able to make their journey to the city. The second component of this architecture is the realization of labor power for everyday construction work, which is to do with how the building is constructed, how masonry takes place, and how the shuttering work takes place, how work is divided between workers. The third is the renewal of labor power or the everyday reconstitution of bodily energy of workers. So builders accommodate laborers in construction labor camps. The weekly payment of subsistence, which is also called in the colloquial language, kuraki. Kuraki in English simply means dosage. So it is given on a weekly basis to meet the specific daily reproduction needs of the workers. So my first finding in relation to the politics of class is to do with the politics of mobilizing Bihari laborers. The politics of mobilizing Bihari laborers entails the reproduction of core and trusted labor network for a thekedar to be able to accumulate capital. The languages of morality of caste, village level kinship, etc. are deployed for the same. Laborers are trusted not simply because of who they are or where they come from, but because of their ability to work at the sites. This distinction between core and trusted workers and other laborers is made by paying a higher amount of advance to the skilled workers, the supervisors, so that their labor power can be retained for a longer period of time. That said, however, there are workers, Bihari workers, who will work for the thekedar without taking any advance. But those who do take an advance will receive a slightly reduced daily wage rate as compared to those who do not. The second aspect of this politics of mobilization is a thekedar is very keen to build his reputation as a good thekedar. And this serves as a mechanism of, as I argue, as a mechanism of oppression by offering regular work, more advance, and in turn, it reproduces trust and loyalty for enhancing a thekedar's ability to accumulate surplus through construction. However, thekedars avoid the use of force or coercion because they need to become a good thekedar, and in turn, they can command the loyalty of good and hardworking laborers to continue to stay with them. In terms of looking at how the work is organized, while I was doing my field work and I was running from one side to the other, the workers who potentially saw me actually as a thekedar was actually wondering, and asking me, what kind of sites are you actually looking at? And I had no clue. And they used to constantly ask me, is it measurement site or is it a supply site? And this was the key distinction that both workers and thekedars used to make. And that is how actually the work is organized in large-scale building construction. So the first site which I spoke about, the Rishabh developers, was the measurement site, whereas the BSS, the vertical one, was a supply site. Thekedars undertake contracts on measurement basis, which means that the work is done either based on output each day as planned by building site engineers. In this case, workers may need to work extra hours to finish a piece of work, or if it is possible, they can finish the work faster depending on their ability to work fast. However, the possibility of overtime, giving overtime to the worker, is centrally dependent on the thekedar. Under measurement-based work, the intensification of work generates surplus for thekedars and builders. That is, laborers need to do more work in less time. So work is considered to be done under measurement work, and only then thekedars and builders will receive their payments. Sorry, thekedars will receive their payments from the builders. In contrast to measurement-based, for thekedars who take contracts on supply work, it is the head count of workers, so number of laborers, which matters to them, to the condition that all of them need to work for at least 8 hours a day. And the total number of man hours actually worked per worker enables a thekedar to accumulate surplus. In this case, the work is done when 12 hours are over, and there is likelihood for thekedars to offer overtime to workers. And at BSS site, I could also always see most workers loitering around here and there during the work time. And when I used to ask them, why is that the case? And they used to tell me, since we are on supply, so we just are killing time so that it is anyways recorded in our system that we are here at the site. So even if we work or not, that probably will hardly matter. But if the munshi actually catches hold of us, we need to go back to the site. So essentially, in supply-based work, it results in not intensification, but extension of the working day. In this case, the entry and exit of laborers is heavily timed through biometric entry system at these large-scale construction sites. Now, how do builders actually track what is going on? It is mandatory for the munshi to actually maintain what is called a daily labor report. It is an account of work done, and I used to see munshis carrying a red book and a blue book. So daily labor report was the red book. The second was a supply slip, which is also seen as the count of number of laborers as directed by builders. So through daily labor report and the supply slip, builders are informed on an everyday basis of the work that is being done, but also how many workers are actually working on the site. Organization of work in under measurement and supply systems are also about valorizing the ability of Bihari labor as culturally specific forms of labor power. And in this case, when I came across a Bengali thekedar, he was having all praise for Bihari workers. And so these model idioms of hardworking Bihari mistris and helpers are not used only by Bihari laborers, but also by Bengali laborers. And when I asked the thekedar, why is that the case? And he said that Bihari workers are actually able to work faster than Bengali workers when it specifically comes to measurement-based work. So they can get the job done as quickly as possible. So skilled Bihari workers are actually central to measurement work. So that means thekedars from Bihar are more likely to look at measurement-based work because it can offer more profits to them rather than looking at supply-based work. However, the advantage in having a supply-based work for a thekedar is security of the surplus, because the thekedar is aware that if they work with 30 workers, the amount of monthly bills that they will generate is actually fixed. And so they don't have to worry about the risks of the surplus. The second aspect of this politics is I took this picture and I was standing right opposite this construction happening. And I was speaking to the thekedar who had been contracted to work for this particular building. The politics of the rate at which work is done is about working fast or working slow. And here I want to present a brief excerpt, and I'm going to narrate a brief interaction that was going on between the thekedar and one of the mistri, also the skilled worker. Mansoor ji, a Muslim thekedar from Bihar, requested Afzal Mistri to work on a Sunday, which he denied immediately. Afzal Mistri suggested that if the thekedar gives him the building on contract, he can actually think of working on a Sunday. To this, the thekedar said, well, you can go and have a look and tell me an estimation of how many man days you will require to finish this job. During this time, the thekedar had already calculated that it would not require more than 12 mistris to finish the plastering of this 3-floor villa. Lastly, the Afzal Mistri could negotiate for the payment of 14 mistris and not 12, and 14 helpers as well, for finishing the task in one day, after which all of them would be getting wages equivalent to 2 days of work, which is also called Hajri, and Hajri is seen as 1 day of work. Mansoor ji thekedar was actually least bothered if Afzal could get the task done with fewer mistris or laborers, because in either case, Afzal could get the payment for 14 mistris and laborers. After this conversation about the contract for plastering one of this building, the thekedar tried to continually convince the mistri to keep working on Sundays, and he can keep giving him double payment. However, Afzal Mistri, who is one of the best mistris of the thekedar, known for his loyalty to the thekedar for decades, he told me that he continued to refuse to work on Sunday because the thekedar will then gauge his ability to work fast, and then that could be normalized later on, and that could be seen as a way in which the mistri could be put to heavy rates of getting the work done. However, in time rate work, laborers are actually keen to work overtime because it increases the number of hours and it enhances surplus for thekedars. So effectively, laborers are actually made to work fast under measurement-based work, but they may work slow under supply work. The second is to do with working on Sundays is used as a coercive mechanism to check which workers can work fast or slow, because working on a Sunday offers the possibility for workers to earn a full day wage by working only half a day on the Sunday. Going home is also regulated, but not coerced, as thekedars would lose laborers. It would create a bad reputation for them. And however, the thekedar tries to intensify the work in case there is a shortage of labor or replaces the labor from the site. The third and, the second kind of politics that I want to highlight in terms of the work is this politics of settling labor accounts. And in the photograph here, I'm sitting right opposite them. This is on a Sunday afternoon when the workers have finished their work for half the day. And this is a routine exercise for every Sunday afternoon. So what is happening here? The payment of wages to migrant laborers in building construction is often known as hisab karna. Hisab means act of settlement of accounts. It can happen either monthly, or it is also subject to payments received from builders to the thekedars. In this sense, the payment of wages is actually withheld. Instead of a daily wage paid by the thekedar to the laborers, it is deferred. The amount paid by thekedars for laborers' daily subsistence is weekly subsistence is gradually deducted from the advance that the laborer has taken from the thekedar before starting the work. And based on this calculation, which is called hisab, so the total earnings of the worker minus any kind of advance that has been taken, and also deducting the weekly subsistence expenses, reveals the outstanding amount that a worker should be receiving. And let's just have a quick look at this box that is here. It shows a sample calculation of a wage, daily wage worker, Bihari helper. And the usual daily wage rate for a Bihari helper is a 300 rupees, rupee 300 per day. And for every week, the worker receives 1,000 rupees. So in terms of the calculation, this worker has not taken any advance from the thekedar. So it means the amount that is here, 6387, is actually the thekedar actually owes to the worker of the work that the helper has actually been doing. However, while this settlement takes place, the act of doing hisab is controlled by the thekedar. It is seen as an accumulation strategy, which is employed by not paying laborers their outstanding wages immediately. Further, withholding payments of wages also serves as a disciplining tool in which laborers need to ask or negotiate to actually be able to settle their wage payments. However, Bihari migrant laborers who are paid a higher subsistence amount than Bengali laborers continue to negotiate for their daily reproduction needs by demanding more subsistence payment from the munshi on every Sunday evening. So this process, this exercise takes almost an hour and a half, where a worker comes to the room of the construction labor camp and receives the subsistence. And if, as you can see, the munshi is recording the amount of money that is being given. However, now while workers, Bihari laborers can demand extra amount of subsistence money, the munshi tries and uses moral languages of persuasion to discipline workers' expenses and limit their demands. For instance, laborers are asked to spend less on their drinks. However, they are not forced to stop drinking. In fact, I was also told that why don't you educate them that they should not be drinking because it is bad for health. The third, and which is also the final glimpse from my thesis on the politics of class relations, is to actually do with the politics of labor strikes. While thekedars aim to secure their surplus through building construction work, builders also exercise control over thekedars by delaying their payments. So I was told that the usual way of delaying payments is roughly around 2 to 3 months. Now, this delay of payments affects how thekedars pay their laborers every week. This essentially means that those big thekedars who have a lot of capital, they can actually manage to pay the workers because they have been operating probably more than one construction work site to manage the risks involved from the builders. However, those workers who are not able to pay the work, those thekedars were not able to pay the workers, this becomes a matter of concern. And that is where it brings me to payment delays by builders means that thekedars may delay subsistence amounts of money to the laborers. However, thekedars are actually very aware that delaying weekly subsistence to workers would mean it would create a bad name for the thekedar, so much so that the laborers may start to either run away or try to find another thekedar to work for. To avoid this, the thekedars command the workers to actually strike and stop the work for one day or two, after which the builders release partial, if not full payments. Not all thekedars can actually participate in the strike because some feel that they are heavily vulnerable to the builders, and in fact, the builders can easily replace them, which also happened while I was doing my research, that a new thekedar was brought and the old one was replaced without giving any notice. Further, Bihari laborers also raise demands from the builders, specifically when it comes to issues of daily reproduction. So if they don't have water, electricity, or issues of toilet in their labor camps, and this is when the thekedars agree and also ask them to stop the work and not go to the construction site. However, amidst all this labor strikes, what happens is laborers lose their daily wages. To just sum up and to bring the everyday politics of class relations together, is my research indicates that the politics of class is visible through conditions of production and reproduction. The interests of Bihari laborers and thekedars could be coordinated but also contested depending on these conditions, especially when it comes to payment of weekly expenses, payment of more advance, the possibility of intensifying daily work at construction sites, or for that matter, regular availability of construction work. Such politics actually emerges out of a mutual interaction of a moral economy kind of a relationship between thekedars and laborers, wherein thekedars are obliged to find work for the laborers because they are the ones who are working for them. However, I also see very clearly an exercise of class-based domination by thekedars, because the aim of thekedars is to maximize profit, their surplus, by not necessarily maintaining the moral economic obligations to their laborers, as they can be replaced even after decades of being loyal and trustworthy. However, moral idioms of hardworking Bihari laborers continue to legitimize extraction of surplus in building construction. As a result, under the thekedari system, coercion and consent are exercised in different ways, which shape concrete universals of the lived experience of exploitation. While classes of labor are compelled to sell their labor power under capitalism, it is these concrete universals which shape class relations. In this sense, Bihariness is identified as a concrete universal of the lived experience of exploitation of Bihari workers, which is constituted in and through the differences of Bihari labor power, seen as culturally specific form, differences in their skill, daily wage rates, etc. This is also visible in terms of payment of advance, weekly expenses, and daily work at construction sites. Just to conclude, is my research indicates that the thekedari system, which I see as a political apparatus of production, it enables and silences class relations. It interlocks culturally specific forms of labor power from specific regions within India, which reproduce system of migrant labor. And this system of migrant labor is similar but different from the kafala system in the Gulf and the huko in China. The thekedari system also has deploys a heavy significance of moral and cultural realms in shaping the lived experience of exploitation. My research also indicates that class relations emerge or are silenced as a result of this lived experience, which is produced politically in dialectical relation with how surplus extraction takes place. And finally, class-based political action is possible, but not plausible in the context of labor migration. As borrowing from Michael Burway's work, this is heavily dependent on specific conditions of production and reproduction. Thanks all of you for listening. And I'll just stop sharing now.
So let me just stop maybe the yeah. Okay. Thanks so much, Manish, for doing this. This was very, very interesting. And of course, lots of questions and just the detail in which you kind of brought that thing, brought the kind of laboring condition, the take-it system to life. It was, yeah, it was just a treat to listen to. So, of course, we're open to questions and comments now. I'll start the discussion with a couple of comments while people are just gathering their thoughts. And of course, you can just to everyone in the audience, you can of course write your questions in the chat or raise your hands afterwards. So, I mean, I was very, of course, you brought that together in the end. I was very intrigued by of course, the role of the takedar. They have this dual role almost, right? Like where they are the exploiters, but then they're also kind of enticing labor to kind of strike at these strategic moments, and so there's this kind of interesting dual role that is happening. But I actually wanted to ask if um, I mean, you say that they are also kind of making a surplus. So I am assuming that you're saying in a way that the takedars are also kind of a form, like a kind of capitalist in this setup, or So I'm just trying to push you to how to see if you see them as capital, because they appear in that sense, and if they're actually in competition with each other, and so if you could kind of, is there a competition between these different takedars or between whether, they are in the measurement side or the supply side, and what does that mean also for the kind of movement of labor? Um, and then I guess the other thing I just picked up on was that I think there was this kind of sub point in one of your slides that the helpers could be both upper caste and also Dalit, even though the Mistris were upper caste. And I wonder if, since so much of your analysis kind of on the lived experience of exploitation, I don't know if you've had a chance to also look at kind of helpers who are from different castes, and does that make a difference to that sort of lived experience? So yeah, you can answer whatever you want from there, all of it or some of it, and then we'll move to the rest of the audience.
Yeah. Thanks. Very interesting questions, and this has been a debate within my thesis as well, to clearly call Thekedars as capitalists or not, and also seen as, are Thekedars, if not capitalists, are they informal capitalists? Yeah, so I mean, I see why I have not called them as capitalists is to more see them as how they are also inducted within the system with builders, but also they remain at the risk of the builders. So maybe it's probably early to call them capitalist, or maybe it's just a time issue. But to me, I think they are more enabling the process of surplus extraction, but also accumulating surplus. At the same time, they are heavily controlled by building companies. So in that sense, I feel I'm not quite sure if I should actually call them capitalists or not, because they do reinvest their the surplus into their system, because they mobilize labor and they also accumulate profits in that sense. For helpers who are Dalits, yes, I did come across the Dalit helper who was actually most Bihari laborers who are at these sites are male migrants, but a few Dalit helpers actually come with their family. So I came across this Dalit helper who was actually with his wife and a small kid as well, who has been working there with the same Thekedar for quite a while. And of course, the way uh, his lived experience has been will slightly differ from probably upper caste mysteries in that sense. But I would feel that the brunt of the way in which extraction is organized will probably will also fall on the Dalit helper as much as it will fall on on the mystery as well. So yeah, I do have some excerpts in terms of how much advance they have to take, because just to enable social reproduction in their families back home, but they're not able to repay, and they continue to keep working for the same thekedar as such. So yes, in that sense, yes, there is a slight difference in that experience.
Thank you so much. So yes, so it's open to people in the audience. Does anyone want to ask a question? Please raise your hand or type a comment in the chat. There's some compliments for you on the chat. Meantime, um, this Gaurav. Gaurav, you're on the chat. Do you want to just unmute yourself and maybe ask, or I could, if you're able to.
Uh, y- yeah, I can do that. Thanks, Manish, thanks for such an engaging presentation. It was such a detailed one. I mean, enjoyed that aspect of it. Even, I mean, the whole how they were making the hisab that you said, and the whole politics part of it. Really enjoyed that part. I was more intrigued to know the social reproduction aspect of these laborers. I may have heard you wrong, but I think you mentioned that most of them were male laborers. So, and you mentioned about like alcoholism, among them. So I mean, but apart from that, could you say more about what happens after those 8 to 12 hours of their work? How are they, you know um, organizing themselves? So, like, reproducing their labor power to go back. I mean, it sounds very strenuous. I mean, 16 hours of work, 12
Yeah.
hours of work. So how's maybe the social reproduction aspect of it? That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks. Thanks for the question, Gaurav. So uh, my comment will be mostly related to more like daily reproduction of labor rather than the social reproduction, which I think my research has not covered, which is most likely going on. And also the question of, how do women come into this scenario, that is relatively underexplored within the scope of the thesis. But when it comes to daily reproduction, so what happens after these 8 to 12 hours is, of course, in big construction sites, I somehow managed to join them in the bus that actually takes them from the site to the labor camp. There are around 4 to 5 buses that go. And then uh, Bihari workers have an inclination to actually cook food. They don't eat in the canteens which are run by thekedars or thekedar appointed supervisors. And first thing is, all of them start to cook food for their dinner. And for some it's a time of probably watching movies, uh, I don't know, spending your time gossiping and on liquor, and that is the time when they start abusing the thekedar, and that is the time when they start expressing their frustration with the kind of labor relation that they are into. And this is also it is also reified. It is also actually agreed by thekedars that once a drop of liquor goes onto the tongues of these workers, they start expressing all frustration. But otherwise, all of the time during the day when they're working, they will not even utter a single word against the thekedar. So I think uh, most of my work on the daily reproduction bit was during the evenings when they spend time cooking, probably drinking, watching movies, and then preparing for the next day to get up and again catch the bus to go to the site. Sorry, does that?
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Okay.
If I could just add, I mean, in one of my fieldwork site, I found that in a similar kind of work, a lot of illicit drugs and were being peddled or used by these workers to did you also see something, and maybe a politics of it, how it was like, whether the thekedars were involved in that, or like maybe on that front?
Hmm. Thanks. So actually, that does come into my thesis in some bit. So when I used to wander around labor camps, I actually entered, these lanes where loads of workers are actually turning up, and but they're not able to enter a particular shop. And I happen to encounter other sets of workers who come from different areas of the city just to get, marijuana. And for them, they distinguish between the fact that Bihari workers don't take marijuana. They're actually keen on taking liquor. So there is a distinction over there in terms of the drug element as well. I found a worker from Orissa, and he was very clearly saying that only marijuana can help me work for 16 hours a day, not liquor. So uh, it does come into my research in that sense. What is the distinction that is being produced on uh, very specific forms of daily reproduction, and how it also then reifies a very narrative that Bihari workers have a very different style of daily reproduction, and then they start seeing the Bengali workers or the other workers as you know that they don't have a knowledge of how to live, they take drugs. So there is that comparison also going on within the labor camp in that space.
Great, thanks. So we have lots of questions in the chat, and somebody also raised their hands. What I'll do is I'll just go read out Shahab's question on the chat, and then I'll come to Harish. So, and then back to the other questions on the chat. So Saqib has a question. He's conducting his master's thesis on the same topic in Pakistan, and focusing on housing industry and street labor markets in Islamabad. So if you could say something, Manish, to him about how do you differentiate contractor from subcontractor? How do you see their roles, contractor vis-a-vis a subcontractor and workers? Because in his own field, Thekedars do not directly interact with workers, and the subcontractors mediate their relationship with workers, and sort of that chain in itself diffuses responsibility and accountability. So yeah, if you
Yeah.
want to answer something.
Thanks, Shahab. I think that's an excellent question, because I came across Bengali laborers who have this hierarchy of contractor and subcontractor, but it was not in the case of Bihari workers. So in the case of Bihari workers, there was only a clear relationship between thekedars and laborers, and thekedars were actually the so-called the contractor, the subcontractor. Contractor is actually the building company, which is actually contracted, which has actually been contracted by the client for constructing. So that is called the principal contractor, and thekedars are actually seen as subcontractors in that sense. Uh, However, there is another line of hierarchy when it comes to Bengali workers, is that the thekedars directly do not actually interact with workers. They have someone in the middle again who's called the dafadar. And dafadar is a very historical, colonial way of recruiting labor. Is the dafadar actually recruits a particular number of laborers for 61 days. Sorry, yeah, 60 or 61 days. And the worker has to work for 61 days, only after which they will receive the payment. That kind of a contractual relation does not exist in a thekedar labor relation of Bihari workers. But yes, it drills down in the context of, how are these culturally specific forms of labor power uh, organized in that sense through that subcontracting. So it could differ in the case of, I don't know, workers who come from a different part of India. But that said, yes, it does diffuse responsibility and accountability in that sense, because it increases the chain through which the hierarchies of control can also be established.
Great, thanks for that answer. And thanks, Rob, for your question. So Harish, if you would like to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah, hi. Hi, Manish. Thanks for the very kind of illuminating from the field. I'm a PhD student at University of Bath, and I'm in the middle of my ethnographic field work, and I'm looking at uh, the home and work in the construction industry, like how the home, the process of homemaking, operates in the workers who stay on site. So, and I'm looking at the workers from Bihar, like the flooring workers in Bangalore. So I joined late because of some reason, so I missed the the first half. So if you can let me know how I can access the recording later. My question is regarding the methodological aspects, and I'm sorry if you have already mentioned that. So the question is, like, how did you access the bigger sites? And the labor camps, specifically of the big builders, stuff, because I had issue of that, and that's why I focused on more of small scale builders. That's the one question. And second question is regarding how did you see the workers exercising their agency in their relation to the takedars, the way they negotiate, and how they respond to the issues of payment or other like other things they come across in a day-to-day negotiation.
Yeah, thanks, Harish. Exciting to know about your research on construction. And actually, we should actually speak sometime about your work later on. Uh, so yes, methodologically, I think access was a big issue in the initial, I don't know, maybe 7 to 10 days, because what I was doing is I was just visiting construction sites, and most sites had this blue barricade door because you cannot enter. So I was finding specific sites wherein that barricade actually does not exist. And I came across a few where, they have these canteens which are set up right outside the entrance of the construction sites, where there is a more mobility of workers between who can entry and exit at the site. So I used to just go and, have lots of cups of tea at the canteen. And this is how I started having conversations. So during the break time, I used to always see a labor accountant with a red book and a blue book, roaming around. And I used to just ask him, what is this about? And initially, they used to always see me as a potential thekedar, that this is the guy who actually wants to make money. So he wants to learn about it. And however, when I clarified that, then the conversation slightly shifted, because they were trying to conceal a lot of information. But I used to also go to the so-called liquor shops in the evening, when on a Sunday evening, there used to be huge queues of workers to get liquor. And when I used to talk to them, they used to always ask me, are you a journalist? Are you trying to write about us? Because we are facing a lot of issues. So I said, I don't know, but at the moment, it'll be good if you can tell me more. But maybe this is not the right place. And through more informal mechanisms, I got uninterrupted access to the site. In fact, I never had to actually sign the visitor register because of, making friends with security guards at the labor camps and or the tea shop, etc. So there was no structure of accessing a site in that sense. And the question of workers' agency, yes, definitely. Workers abuse takedars. They actually demand for money. If the takedar says that I cannot pay you, say an additional 500 this week, then they just say that we're not going to work. We want to go back to our village. So there is that contestation that goes on. But also it is the job of the munshi to try and see how this can be managed. So in some cases it is managed. In some cases they actually have to agree and pay the worker more. So yeah.
Thanks for sharing, Manish.
Thank you. And also, if you missed the recording, like they're usually up on our YouTube page, I'll drop a link when Manish is answering the next question. Um,
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
so we have a question from Suraj and then from Noor. I'll just read both out. Manish, you can read them as I go as well.
Yeah.
So the first is from Suraj, who is wondering, how does surplus extraction via extension of time work, when the extension of working time also means overtime wages for laborers? So meaning larger payments to the labor side of the capitalist production. And then shouldn't there be some system to ensure minimum labor output in the normal working hours? And if yes, what were the mechanisms in place to ensure that extraction happens smoothly? And finally, I was wondering, if the payments are delayed, what stops workers to join other thekedars as an alternative, and consequently a fear among thekedars that workers will leave them in the same area. So I suppose there's that, and maybe there's also Noor's question on, social protections, not as formal
Mhm.
rights, but as real rights, and the kind of triple absence of rights that we associate with migrants. So something on that.
Yeah. Thanks, Suraj. There are lots of questions there, so I'm going to unpack slowly and while I read. So yes, ideally, larger payments to the workers when they are working overtime. But the record books that I actually looked at, and interestingly, throughout COVID now lockdown for over a year, the labor accountant, interestingly used to send me photographs of the records of workers in actual calculations of how much they have been paid, etc., how much overtime. And I haven't come across a specific change in wage rates for overtime work. That said, a possibility for overtime work, getting more wages in overtime work, is a point of negotiation, which can only happen in measurement-based work. And that is subject to how well the negotiation takes place between the thekedar and the mistri. But there's no clear-cut, protocol or a rule in that sense. Minimum labor output, definitely. And that is what the foremen are there for every day on the site. They are continuously looking at what is going on a daily basis. So for instance, if they have to put for the building, the scaffolding has to be put. So the foreman told me that, the job of scaffolding will be done when the scaffolding has been put up fully, not that workers keep bringing the material and putting it here. So he is constantly, he's been told by the thekedar that next 4 weeks, you need to plan for this. And then he follows it and says, okay, today I want to finish scaffolding. And then he exercises that hierarchy of control down to the mistries and the helpers. And these mechanisms are also, I found that sometimes very friendly, non-coercive, to the extent that they are also, all sitting at the same time having tobacco, having fun, and also engaging with that sort of process going on. If the payments are delayed, yes, so of course, there's a question of most workers take advance from thekedars, so they need to pay the advance back. So one is it that they cannot actually just directly go to the other thekedar. However, I had a very interesting observation when I was able to spend a few days in the origin villages of these workers. And I was sitting with a worker in the village market, and he saw a motorbike with two thekedars actually on the bike, and he told me that these are the two thekedars who you should also talk to. And the moment the thekedar actually came closer to the worker to access something from the shop, the thekedar slightly bowed his head and just said nothing. And then the thekedars went away, and I asked him, is there something wrong between you and this thekedar? He said, yeah, I stopped working for him and I owe him money. But then I asked, haven't you paid him back? He said, there's no necessity for me to pay it right away. I can pay as long as, as much in my own time frame. And then the question was, well, why isn't the thekedar actually wanting the money back? So, and then he said, well, if the thekedar actually demands money from me, I will go and tell others that don't work for this thekedar. So there is this, inbuilt loop that has been built, which reproduces that whole circle through these very, subtle languages of coercion and consent. And yes, thekedars also have a fear that workers might leave them. But, and that is where this idea of the core and trusted laborers come in, because they will just keep an eye and tell these workers that try and watch and find out other laborers potentially who can come handy whenever these guys are trying to go away. So not like you can just pay an advance upfront, but keep in mind that we'll need at least 2 to 3 people in some point of time. So thanks, Suraj. That helped me actually think a lot, because I was not able to think in that direction. So thanks, Noor, for your question. Of course, there is clear triple absence of labor rights, and only since my engagement with the role of the state is to the level of that the state is actually enforcing and guaranteeing all kinds of class relations that take place over here, is also to do with, well, Bihari workers are actually not concerned or not interested to actually access social security welfare. It's also to do with the so-called, the shield that the thekedars are providing by giving them so much of advance that they do not need to worry about engaging with the state in that sense. But I think that will form another area of research, because that needs much more attention to what is the relation going on between the state and the thekedar, which is actually not a scope of my own research. I don't know if that is answer your question.
I think that's
Okay. Yeah.
Can I ask you one final question, unless
Yes.
someone
Yes.
else has some questions? So, or maybe this will be the final question. So, I wanted you to say a bit more about your last statement that said that politics is possible but not plausible. Um, and I was wondering at what level you're making that argument, because a lot of the examples of the politics of the labor that you of negotiating these relationships that you give, they're kind of at the level of the site, no? So, or are you thinking of, I don't know where you're placing this argument, and so I just wanted you to say maybe a bit more about it, and also maybe as part of it, I was curious if their kind of their life in the village, which I know is not your focus,
Yeah. Yeah.
but that agrarian reality, because ultimately with the classes of labor, I guess one of the things is also that with migrant labor, they're in two places, and I don't know if that they're kind of agrarian and that plays any role in this. So just any thoughts based on this, on that final statement? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yes, definitely my work is focused on the site. But that said, it looks into production and their daily reproduction. So which is why social reproduction is again a realm which the thesis has not touched on. But the basis of making that claim is to say that it is conditions which actually enable the possibility for class-based action, rather than the fact that just because they are exploited and hence they experience and hence there is a you know class-based action to take place. So I think it's about bringing much more focus on these conditioning mechanisms which relate to the very possibilities of political action to take place. But yes, I mean, that said, the agrarian reality is the of the village level of because in my case, I had workers who were also landowning workers, but also workers who were landless in that sense. So that is still does not figure out in the scope of my work. Yeah.
Great, thanks so much. So I think that's everything. I think we can draw it to a close. The only thing left to do is to thank you and to congratulate you. And really, I think you can tell from the comments, everybody really enjoyed just the kind of depth of your work. And thank you for sharing it so generously with all of us. And I think we can bring it to a close. This is the last seminar, and thanks everybody for joining us, and to a lot of you who stayed, to whoever stayed till the end, and lots of people left only just a few minutes ago. So thanks everybody. Thanks, Manish.
Thank you so much, Shreya.